My son chose to call a stranger his father and me nobody. Hello. My name is Robert and this is my sad story. I am 54 years old. I live in Chicago in a small apartment that overlooks the kind of street where nothing ever really happens. The days are quiet, except for the hum of passing cars and the occasional bark of a dog. I used to have a family. A wife. A son. A house that smelled of dinners and arguments and laughter that never quite included me. Now I have silence, and silence is honest. My son's name is Alex. He turned 21 this year, an age where men start to believe they've already learned everything worth knowing. Since he was 9, I have carried the weight of raising him. School tuition, medical care, new shoes every fall, baseball games, dentist visits, braces, every invisible cost that kept his world spinning. When Linda, his mother, and I divorced, I told myself that I would not fail him the way other men fail. I would stay constant, dependable. I would be the quiet anchor behind his life. Linda remarried 3 years after the divorce. His name was Tom. A man who wore confidence like cologne, thick and manufactured. The kind of man who spoke too loudly, laughed too easily, and took photos of everything. He had a lake house, a boat, a smile designed for social media. If you looked at him, you might think he'd invented happiness. I met him once at Alex's high school graduation. He shook my hand like a politician. Firm, practiced, meaningless. I told myself I didn't care. Linda could choose whoever she wanted. I only cared that Alex was okay. But even then, I noticed how Alex's body language shifted when Tom approached. Shoulders straighter, smile wider. My son's eyes flickered toward him the way a compass turns north. I was standing right there and somehow I was already fading. For a while, I ignored it. I thought it's normal, he's a teenager. The world is supposed to spin around new things when you're that age. I paid for college applications, bought him a car, sent money every month. When he came home for holidays, I tried to talk to him about real things, about work, about patience, about what it means to build something that lasts. But his answers were always short, polite, distant. Yeah, I'm good, Dad. Then his phone would buzz and his eyes would drift somewhere else, probably toward a message from Tom. It's strange how love doesn't end with rejection. It lingers, bruised and breathing. You keep showing up, keep paying the bills, keep believing that if you're steady enough, if you prove yourself long enough, they'll notice. I told myself that one day he would understand who really stayed. Then came the Christmas that broke me. I wasn't invited, of course. I hadn't been in years. But I saw it all through the miracle of modern cruelty. A video someone posted online, the kind that spreads without thought. There was Linda's house, or rather Tom's house now. Polished floors, glowing lights, glasses raised in celebration. Everyone dressed like the photograph of a perfect life. Alex stood in the center of it, tall, proud, his hair slicked back like Tom's. He had a drink in his hand, wine maybe or champagne. His cheeks were flushed with youth and belonging. The people around him, Tom's friends, Linda's relatives, were laughing. Then he lifted his glass, smiled and said it. To Tom, the man who showed me what being a father really means. It wasn't loud, but it didn't have to be. Everyone heard. The room applauded. Tom smiled, that perfect public smile, the one that said I've won. Linda dabbed at her eyes with a napkin, pretending the emotion was pride. I replayed that video until the light from the screen turned my hands blue. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a ceremony, a coronation. And I was the ghost watching it from exile. I thought of every night I'd stayed late at work to cover his tuition, every birthday I'd spent alone because he was at Tom's cabin, every message left unread because there was always something better to do. I thought of the time he called me because his car had broken down in the middle of winter, and I drove 2 hours in the snow just to bring him home. He'd thanked me, but even then, his gratitude felt rehearsed, like he was checking a box. That night, after seeing the video, I sat in my apartment with the lights off. The city outside kept living, laughter echoing from some nearby bar, the low thrum of traffic, a siren somewhere in the distance. Life going on without me. I poured myself a drink and watched the snow drift down through the streetlight. For 21 years, I believed fatherhood was a kind of quiet contract. You give, you protect, you endure, and someday the world balances the debt. But that night I understood the truth. In some hearts, love is transactional and memory is short. A man like Tom could appear with a lake house and a winning smile, and suddenly the years you spent bleeding yourself dry mean nothing. I imagined him standing there beside my son, arm around his shoulder, smiling for the camera. The father figure who hadn't earned the title, wearing it anyway. The video ended with a toast. The room full of laughter, crystal glasses clinking like tiny hammers driving the nails into something I'd been trying to keep alive. I closed my laptop, sat in the dark, and listened to the faint ringing in my ears. Not anger, not grief, just the hollow hum of realization. I didn't cry. Not right away. Men like me are conditioned to leak pain in smaller ways. Clenched jaws, long silences, unpaid phone calls. I just sat there, still, staring at the reflection of my own face in the black screen. It's strange, the world doesn't end with betrayal. It just becomes quieter. The next morning, I looked at the framed photo of Alex on my desk. 8th grade graduation. The day he'd asked me to tighten his tie because he couldn't get the knot right. His smile then was open, uncertain, real. I touched the edge of the glass and felt something inside me loosen. That's when I decided I would never beg for a title again. Love, respect, fatherhood, they can't be begged or bought. They're given. Freely or not at all. I closed the blinds, turned off the light, and whispered the words that had once cut me open. To Tom, the man who showed me what being a father really means. And for the first time those words didn't hurt. They simply existed, proof that the story I thought was mine had already been rewritten without my consent. That was the night I stopped pretending I still had a son. 4 years I had been saving for Alex, a fund that began when he was a boy with crooked teeth and dreams of being a pilot. Back then, I opened a small account in his name and deposited what little I could after bills. $20 here, $50 there, sometimes more when work was steady. Over time it grew. By the time he turned 21, there was nearly $140,000 waiting for him. Tuition, housing, a car, a start in adult life. I used to think of it as a promise carved into numbers. I'll take care of you even when you stop needing me. After the toast, that promise began to rot. I stopped making new contributions. The next month, when the bank sent me an automated reminder about the scheduled deposit, I canceled it. The silence that followed was heavier than I expected, like ending a prayer halfway through. At first it didn't matter. Alex didn't notice. He was too busy living the good life. Weekends at Tom's lake house, trips to Nashville, photos of him grinning beside a boat I hadn't paid for. He had started dressing like Tom, too. Expensive shoes, tailored shirts, the same kind of watch that gleamed in every picture Tom posted. I scrolled through those images late at night, the same way you might touch a bruise just to see if it still hurts. He still called me sometimes. Usually for money. Never for conversation. Hey Dad, can you send a few hundred for books? Hey Dad, rent's due early this month. Hey Dad, I might need a new laptop. The old one's slow. Each time I sent what he asked for. Out of habit, maybe. Or weakness. Each transaction felt like tossing another coin into a well that no longer granted wishes. Then one afternoon, a message came, short, casual, as if he were ordering lunch. Hey, thinking about a trip with Tom and some friends this summer? Can you transfer me $6,000? I'll pay you back when I start working. $6,000. For a vacation. I stared at the message until the words blurred. Then I typed a single reply. No. He responded with a question mark as if I'd made a typo. No. No, I repeated. If Tom is the man who showed you what being a father means, maybe he can also show you what financial responsibility looks like. The typing bubbles appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then came the sentence that would have broken me once. Now it only clarified the air. Why are you being petty? I didn't answer. I simply closed the conversation, set the phone face down, and went back to my dinner, cold, overcooked pasta that tasted like resignation. The next week Linda called. I hadn't spoken to her in months. Her voice was tight, controlled, the way people sound when they're trying to package guilt as reason. Robert, what's going on with Alex's payments? His landlord said you haven't sent anything. I'm done, I said. Done with what? With pretending money can fix respect. She sighed, that same long exhale I used to hear whenever she wanted to avoid confrontation. You're upset about that toast, aren't you? I'm not upset, I said. I'm awake. You're punishing him for being young, she said softly. No. I'm teaching him what it costs to replace a father. Silence. Then. You know Tom can't afford all that. Then maybe he should have thought about that before taking the title. Her voice cracked. Robert, please. He's still your son. No, I said quietly. He was my son. Then he gave the word father away. Now I'm just the man who funded the lesson. She hung up without another word. For the first time in years, my account balance didn't shrink at the end of the month. The stillness in those numbers felt strange, like looking at a wound that finally stopped bleeding. Weeks passed. Then the calls began. Alex again, this time less casual. Hey, my rent bounced. Can you cover just this 1 month? No. Dad, come on. It's temporary. So was my patience. He called again the next day. You're being ridiculous. Maybe. But I'm finally consistent. By the third call, His tone had changed from anger to confusion. The world had shifted beneath his feet, and he didn't know how to stand without my support. A month later he sent a long message. "Tom's been amazing. He's letting me stay with him for a while. He gets it. You never did." I didn't reply. I just stared at the screen, wondering how long that sanctuary would last once Tom realized what it costs to house another man's child. And sure enough, within 2 months the cracks began to show. Through whispers and half-updated posts, I pieced it together. Alex had moved into Tom's house. He was working part-time at Tom's office, some marketing position that sounded impressive but paid little. They smiled for photos on the dock, holding beers, looking like a father and son made from catalog paper. Then the images changed. Fewer smiles. No tags. No comments. Later, I heard from one of Alex's college friends that Tom had started charging him rent. That when his car broke down, Tom told him to figure it out like an adult. The same man who once toasted to fatherhood had turned into a landlord overnight. I almost laughed when I heard it. Not from joy but from recognition. The world has a way of collecting debts. Then one evening my phone rang again. His name on the screen. I let it ring twice before answering. "Hey," he said, voice quieter than I remembered. "You busy?" "No." He hesitated. "Things are complicated here. Tom's kind of, I don't know. It's weird." "Is he?" I said. "Yeah. He's been distant lately. Says I should start paying for my own stuff. It's hard." "Welcome to adulthood," I said. Silence. Then, "Can I stay with you for a bit? Just until things settle?" I closed my eyes. In another life I would have said yes without hesitation. But that version of me had died the night of the toast. "You can," I said slowly, "but not as a child. If you come here you pay rent. You buy groceries. You live like a man, not a son." He was quiet for a long time. Then, "Okay. I can do that." When we hung up, I sat there staring at the empty glass in my hand. The drink had gone warm, but I didn't pour another. I didn't need to. The numbness felt clean. That night I opened the bank app again. The education fund glowed on the screen, 6 figures of frozen intention. I transferred $20,000 into a new account, labeled simply earned. The rest I left untouched. He would get it if he proved he deserved it, not as a reward but as recognition. That was the moment I understood. Sometimes the only way to save love is to starve entitlement. Money had been my language for too long. Now silence would do the talking. For months after Alex moved in with Tom, I told myself I was done caring. I had made my choice, drawn the line, stepped back from the fire. I thought distance would free me. But even silence has its own weight. Heavy, patient, waiting to remind you what you've lost. At first I watched from afar. His photos still appeared online. Smiling faces against lake water, barbecues, birthday candles, that same house glowing like a shrine to second chances. Alex looked happy. He posted captions about gratitude and growth. Tom stood beside him, hand on his shoulder, the picture of mentorship. And I, the ghost who paid for his past, scrolled through it all in the dark, pretending the tightness in my chest was just fatigue. But illusions never last. Not when they're built on borrowed love and borrowed money. By late spring, small cracks began to show. The photos stopped. The comments slowed. Tom's lake house appeared emptier, the background of Alex's post changing from polished decks to cluttered rooms. Then one afternoon I received a call from Linda. Her voice was brittle. "It's just a rough patch," she said before I even asked. "Tom's adjusting. Alex is too." "Adjusting to what?" I asked. She hesitated. "Tom thinks Alex needs more responsibility. He's been asking him to contribute, rent, utilities, small things." I said nothing. The silence between us stretched until she filled it with the truth she didn't want to say. "He's been charging him rent. Not much, just something." "Something," I repeated. The word tasted like irony. She went on. "Alex's car broke down. Tom told him to handle it himself. You know how he is, believes in tough love." Tough love. The same phrase people use when they want cruelty to sound like virtue. I thanked her for the update, hung up, and sat for a long time at the kitchen table. The hum of the refrigerator filled the room like a clock ticking through someone else's life. That evening, I poured myself a drink and stared at my reflection in the window. The man looking back was calm, too calm. It wasn't satisfaction. It was recognition. The world had simply begged *N to even out. Weeks later, the inevitable happened. Alex called. His voice was hesitant, stripped of the easy arrogance I'd grown used to. "Hey," he said. I need a little help." What kind of help? Just, things are tight right now. Tom's been weird about money. Rent's gone up. My job hours got cut. I'm trying but. He sighed. Could you maybe lend me something? Just until next month? I stared at the silent phone for a second, then answered. No. The pause on the other end stretched thin, fragile. No. That's right. You told the world Tom was the man who showed you what being a father means. Let him finish the lesson. He tried to laugh it off. Come on, Dad, don't be like that. I'm not being like anything, I said. I'm just following your logic. There was a sound, maybe frustration, maybe disbelief. Then he muttered, You're impossible, and hung up. I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Some lessons only take root when silence answers louder than words. Over the next few months, fragments of his new life reached me through others. Linda's weary voice, mutual acquaintances, stray social media updates. Each one painted the same picture. The lake house had rules now, and Tom wasn't the indulgent father figure he'd played online. Alex had lost his job after his car gave out. Tom refused to lend him money for repairs. He's got to grow up, Tom reportedly said. And Linda, caught between guilt and convenience, did what she always did. Nothing. I imagine the dinner's there now. Quieter. Tense. Tom sipping whiskey in his designer chair, Linda filling the silence with forced smiles, Alex shrinking into the corner of a room that no longer felt like home. One night, near the end of summer, I received a message from Alex. No greeting, no pretense. You were right. About everything. I read it twice before replying. About what exactly? He didn't answer. Not that night. Not the next day. A week later he showed up at my door. It was raining, the kind of cold, thin rain that makes the city look like it's grieving. He stood there, soaked through, backpack hanging from one shoulder. He looked older, not in years but in the kind of exhaustion that only truth can give. Hey, he said quietly. I stepped aside. Come in. He did, slowly, like someone entering a church they'd once defiled. We sat at the table, the same one where I'd once written checks for his tuition, his car, his everything. Now it was bare, clean, unburdened. What happened? I asked. He stared at his hands. Tom, he said I couldn't stay there anymore. Said it wasn't personal, just time to grow up. He gave a small, broken laugh. He even charged me for the last week I was there. I said nothing. He continued, voice cracking. Mom didn't say anything. She just stood there. Didn't even look at me when I left. I let the silence sit. It was kinder than words. Finally he looked up. His eyes were red, but there was something new in them, clarity, maybe humility. I didn't get it before, he said. I thought love meant comfort. I thought you could just have it no matter how you acted. But I was wrong. I nodded. People stay only while it's convenient for them. You learn that the hard way. He swallowed hard. Can I stay here? Yes, I said. But there are rules. You get a job. You pay rent. You contribute. You live like a man. He didn't argue. He just nodded. Okay. That night, after he'd gone to bed in the spare room, I sat alone and listened to the rain tapping the window. I thought about the years I'd spent trying to buy respect. I thought about the silence that finally gave it to me. Sometimes you have to let everything collapse before anyone can see what was holding it up. When morning came, I brewed 2 cups of coffee. One for me, one for him. He thanked me without being told. It was the first genuine thank you I'd heard in years. He found work at a warehouse, saved what he could, paid rent on time. Each small gesture repaired something words never could. Slowly he stopped being my son in debt and became a man earning his place. Linda called once asking how he was. I told her he was fine. Better, even. She didn't know how to respond. Guilt has no language once pride runs out. Now, months later, when I see him leaving for work in the morning, I feel something close to peace. He doesn't call me Dad with hesitation anymore. He doesn't flinch when my voice carries authority. He just nods, respectful, grounded. The illusion collapsed. But in the wreckage, something honest took root. And maybe, just maybe, that's what being a father really means. Months passed after Alex came back. He lived in the spare room, paid rent on time, kept to himself. He woke early, worked long shifts at a warehouse on the south side, and returned home smelling of sweat and metal. There was something steady in his exhaustion, something honest. The boy who once mocked responsibility now carried it like a second skin. At first I kept my distance. I spoke little, watched more. Trust, once broken, doesn't rebuild with words. It grows quietly like grass over ruins. Each night we ate dinner together. Nothing fancy, just meat, rice, conversation. He'd ask about work, about bills, about small things. I answered plainly without judgment. Slowly, our silences became less heavy. Sometimes, when he thought I wasn't looking, he'd study me, as if trying to reconcile the man who'd once paid for everything with the man who'd stopped. Maybe he was wondering which version was his real father. The change in him wasn't sudden. It was a slow erosion of pride. I'd see it in the way he folded his clothes, in the way he counted his cash before rent day, in the way he fixed his own car instead of asking for help. He had finally met the version of life that doesn't wait for you to grow up. It drags you there. One evening after a long day he came home with a small envelope. He set it on the table without a word. Inside were receipts, groceries, rent, utilities, every cent accounted for. "You don't need to do this," I said. "I do," he replied. "I need to know I'm not just taking any more." It was such a simple sentence, but it landed like confession. That night, we sat outside on the balcony, the city stretching quiet beneath us. He asked me how I managed all those years after the divorce. I told him the truth, that it wasn't strength, just obligation dressed as love. "Sometimes you give until people forget you're giving," I said. "And when they finally notice, it's only because you've stopped." He nodded, eyes distant. "I thought Tom had it figured out." "He made everything look easy." "Everything looks easy when you never stay long enough to face the cost," I said. He didn't argue. The air between us carried something close to forgiveness, but not the sentimental kind, the practical kind that builds itself out of recognition. Weeks turned into months. He kept his job, saved what he could, and little by little he rebuilt himself. I began to see the outlines of a man who understood consequence, and that was worth more than any apology. Then one morning I woke to find a note on the kitchen table. "Got a promotion. Thanks for everything. Dinner's on me tonight." It was just a few words, but they hit harder than any speech. Gratitude written without guilt. Pride without arrogance. That evening we went to a small diner downtown. Nothing fancy, the kind of place that serves coffee strong enough to wake regret. He insisted on paying and I didn't fight him. As we ate, he told me about his job, about saving for an apartment, about maybe going back to school part-time. His voice carried the quiet conviction of a man who had finally met his own reflection and didn't flinch. At one point he looked at me and said, "I used to think you were cold. But now I get it. You weren't trying to control me, you were trying to teach me how to stand." I didn't answer. Some truths don't need an audience. After dinner we walked along the lakefront. The wind off the water was sharp, clean. He told me he was moving out soon, a small place with a friend from work. I nodded. It was the kind of news that hurts in all the right ways. That weekend I reopened the account I had once closed, the fund I'd built for his future. I transferred $20,000 into his name. Not as a gift but as acknowledgement. The rest I left untouched, waiting. When I handed him the letter from the bank, he looked confused. "What's this?" "Proof," I said. "That you've earned back what I once gave too easily." He tried to speak but I stopped him. "The rest will come when you've proven you don't need it." He smiled, small, genuine. "Deal." Months passed. He moved out, finished his degree part-time, and eventually landed a stable job in logistics. He called every week, not for money but just to talk. Each time, I heard a steadiness in his voice that I'd never heard before. Then one afternoon he invited me to a small gathering, his company's end-of-year dinner. I almost declined, I'd had my fill of toasts. But something in his tone made me agree. The restaurant was modest, warm with noise and laughter. When he saw me he waved, his face lit with pride. "Everyone," he said, "this is my dad." Just that. Not stepdad, not the man who raised me, not some hesitant compromise between gratitude and guilt. Just dad. It lasted only a moment but it was enough. As the evening went on, I found myself watching him the way fathers do when they finally stop worrying. He laughed easily, spoke with confidence, treated the waitstaff kindly. I realized that the boy who once needed saving had become the man I'd hoped he'd become, not because of me but maybe because I finally let him fall. Later that night when we said goodbye he hugged me, firm, unforced. "Thanks for not giving up," he said. "I did give up," I told him. "That's what saved us." He laughed softly. "Then maybe giving up isn't always failure." When I got home I sat at the table where this story began, the same table where I'd once stared at a screen full of betrayal. The city lights shimmered through the blinds, the sound of passing cars filling the spaces that used to echo with regret. I thought about that Christmas night, the toast that broke me. About Tom, whose lake house had long since lost its glow. About Linda, who had traded substance for spectacle. About how everything false eventually collapses under its own performance. And then I thought about Alex, The man he had become, the man I almost lost, the man who now stood on his own. Maybe that's the real lesson. That sometimes you have to step back far enough for someone to see what you were holding up. That sometimes the only way to teach love is to stop funding comfort. I poured myself a drink, raised the glass toward the window and whispered, "To the men who finally learned what being a father means." I drank slowly. The silence around me didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned. So here I am, 54, alone but not lonely, watching the city move without me, knowing I did what needed to be done. Was I wrong? Maybe. Would I do it differently? No. Because sometimes the only way to be a good father is to stop trying to be a perfect one.